On today's show, we have some big debates to talk about. Misa, Martone, McQueen, a bunch of 2025 NHL draft talk, all coming up on today's episode of Locked On NHL Prospects.
You are Locked On NHL Prospects, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello, and welcome back to Locked On NHL Prospects, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. On this podcast, we break down everything prospects related for you 5 days a week, Monday to Friday. I'm Hadi, QMJHL Scout and Crossover Scout for Elite Prospects, with Sebastian, USHL and Crossover Scout for Elite Prospects. And on today's show, we'll be breaking down a couple of debates that are really interesting. We'll talk about Misa versus Martone versus McQueen for the 2025 NHL Draft. We'll also talk about Anton Frondell versus Victor Eklund, a couple of Swedes that are going neck and neck and a lot of boards on today's episode. And our last two segments will be focusing on some QMJHL and USHL standout prospects that we haven't really talked about yet, that have either done pretty well or that, we just think overall haven't been discussed enough on this podcast. Before we get into any of that, though, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers can get up to $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 moneyline bet. That's $150 if your team wins, so visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. If you're watching on YouTube, as usual, remember to like and subscribe. Let us know in the comments what you think of the episode, what you want us to talk about next. And if you're listening on your favorite podcasting platform, please leave us a rating and review and make sure to make us your first listen of the day. So let's get started right away here, because we've got three prospects that are really making a push almost for first overall. They're contending with James Hagens, who's pretty much a placeholder first overall selection until something changes on that side. We can't really knock him for the NCAA season starting later than the other leagues. So I think it's unfair to move him from first overall. But once you get to second, there's a conversation. I mean, Michael Misa has been fantastic. Porter Martone's been fantastic as well in the OHL. And you have Roger McQueen, a 6'5" center who's been dominating the WHL too, right?
Absolutely. There's a lot of very interesting debates towards the upper end of the draft rankings this season. And while I think there's a pretty distinct tier of top 4, top 5 players in this draft class, where they fall is definitely going to be up for us all to kind of assess throughout the season. And that's very fun from a scouting perspective to have a lot of space for those debates. As you mentioned, Michael Misa is he's been off to a blazing hot start with Saginaw this season following a Memorial Cup victory last year, and a bit more of a secondary role, but he's taken the bull by the horns so far this year. And at 6'1", 185, he's no longer the diminutive forward that he was when he entered the OHL. And he can do just about everything. He's good defensively. He has a high work rate. He can play physically. He can play inside contact. He's a dynamic playmaker and a tremendous goal scorer on top of being an elite level skater. There's so much to like with this package, and that has led to a 10-goal, 12-point start through 5 games for Saginaw, which is not half bad. I mean, averaging 2 goals a game through 5 games is certainly something that you love to see, but there's just so much to like with this player.
Yeah, overall, he's been absolutely fantastic. And, there was a bit of a Shane Wright syndrome last year as an exceptional status player who mainly relied on kind of processing and meticulous play and was kind of doing the good things right and all that stuff. But there's a distinct lack of dynamism and game control or ability to take over games with skill from Misa last year. Now this year, it's just been all that, along with the pace and the processing and the intelligence and the intensity and the physical play. He's just really rounded out his game, but in a way that helps him stand out offensively massively. So he's not a player who's relying on cerebral, low-paced plays anymore. He's chasing down pucks. He's creating turnovers, just making plays at a high speed that really make his skill set shine. Elite scorer, elite passer. I think he's definitely got, if it wasn't for these other two kind of muddling the waters a bit, he'd be the clear second overall pick at this point and would be pushing for first overall as well. But, Roger McQueen, 6'5" center, who's been, like I said, dominating the WHL right now. He's leading the league in points, tremendous point totals right now with his team over there. So overall, I mean, you look at the skill set with McQueen and it's just fantastic. I mean, you've got a 6'5" player who can skate fairly well, who has a ton of dynamism as well, like fantastic hands, He can deke through layers of pressure incredibly well, drop the shoulder, go to the net. He can retrieve pucks down low. He can kind of protect pucks along the boards and kind of extend plays in the offensive zone. I mean, there's very little that he can't do. And that's why for me so far he's the number 2 pick. Among those three, he's got a bit of a leg up, not just for the size, but the ability to blend that size with high end skill. The reason I like him is almost the same reason I like Caden Lindstrom, for example, and why he went 4th overall in this draft year. But McQueen has an extra layer of high-end elite skill with the puck, elite hands, great shot, like a plus release, fantastic playmaking habits. He looks off his passes. He kind of draws players to him to open up passing lanes. He can make one-touch pass plays really well, but he can also hang on to the puck and then let lanes open. So the versatile passing game, an elite shot, fantastic hands with the size, with the skating. I mean, what's there to miss on with Roger McQueen, right?
Not much. And as you mentioned, he's off to an absolutely electric start there. He has 8 goals and 11 points in 6 games for the Brandon Wheat Kings. And he's been just playing fantastic hockey. And beyond that, he's also a player that has a lot of developmental runway. Despite being one of the older players in this draft class, is an October 2nd, 06 birthday, so just over 2 weeks shy of being eligible for the 2024 draft. He's still a player that has so much more refinement and polish to seek in his game, but so far this season, he's been really exploring his offensive toolkit and exploring his creativity and trying things. And the vast majority of the things he's trying is working very fluidly. So a lot to look forward to in this season for Roger McQueen. But there's another big CHL forward that we want to talk about who isn't quite as tall as McQueen, but is definitely a bit more violent at this point than Roger McQueen is. And that's Porter Martone of the Brampton Steelheads in the OHL. He's a 6'3", 196-pound right shot right winger. Was a real power forward player. He plays with vicious intent most of the time, and that has already given him 4 goals and 12 points through 4 games this season, along with 12 penalty minutes. So he's been averaging exactly as many points as penalty minutes every single game with 3, which is the kind of combination that you look for in your big power forwards in their draft years. And he's also a guy with a lot of soft skill, not as much pace in his game as a guy like Roger McQueen, for instance, which I think for both of us is a little bit of a separating factor at this point in their development curves, because McQueen can do just about everything with the puck that Martone can, but does it at his higher speeds and can do it while also going east-west, whereas Martone can be a little bit more north-south. But still, so much to like with Martone. He's a born leader. He's already captained Team Canada. He did at the U18 World Championships in May. He's captaining Brampton this season as well. And a lot to like with his game. But these 3 players are definitely really good contenders inside that top 4. And I think at this point are probably the next 3 guys after James Higgins, and are also quite possibly in a same tier of prospect as James Higgins, which makes us a very, very fun year to evaluate prospects.
For sure. I mean, they're the next 3 forwards. I still like Matt Schaefer a ton. I think that he's in the mix. I think he's ahead of Martone right now, but not by a decent margin. Martone, especially watching his game on Saturday, was absolutely fantastic. I mean, he's just... I saw more of that east-west kind of pacey play that I was looking for from him. So he's added those layers to his game. And the chemistry he's developed with Carson Rakoff has been fantastic in Brampton. But we also have one more little debate to close off this segment. And this will be a contentious one. Anton Frondell is not a top 10 pick in either of our opinions, I think. And Victor Eklund definitely is. So there's definitely an argument there to be talked about. And for me, the difference between the two is when I watch Eklund and Frondell play together at the international levels, I very much felt like I was watching Logan Cooley and Cutter Gauthier. Cooley being Victor Eklund, Gauthier being Anton Frondell. And we know which one of the two got picked higher. I think there's definitely a conversation to be had there because Frondell, I don't think, has the upside that people are making him up to have. But his floor is very, very safe. I mean, you're definitely getting an NHLer out of Frondell. I'm just not convinced that he becomes this top liner who dominates offensively the way that he's kind of been made out to be. Whereas Victor Eklund, fantastic skater, fantastic transition player, really intelligent retrievals and board game. overall, just a well-rounded toolkit. Great skill, hands, shot, passing are all plus. Definitely more of a playmaker than anything else. He reminds me a lot of his brother, William Eklund, in that sense. Maybe a tiny bit less skill, a tiny bit more physical inclinement. You know, he's
And
not
pace.
necessarily as and pace. Yeah, he's not as physically gifted as William Eklund, but he's very much more violent than William Eklund.
He definitely seeks out contact a lot more than William did at any point in his draft year. And it's an interesting debate as well because Frondell's a lot more polished at this point than Victor Eklund is. He's very intelligent. He's physically gifted. I mean, he's 6 foot, 196 pounds. He's built really sturdily. He's an intelligent, cerebral two-way centerman who's been outplaying his age group forever, basically. But there's also a player that I think has benefited a lot from that high level of intelligence paired with that physical maturity for quite some time now. And you're seeing other players kind of catch up in their development a little bit more. He's still a top 15 talent in my eyes. I think in terms of like comp, in terms of like stylistic comparable, think along the lines of like a Dalibor Dvorsky, for instance, in terms of very like he likes to get involved physically. He is very difficult to push off the puck in possession. He's competent defensively, pretty good shot in the offensive zone, plays a pretty straightforward and simple game. There isn't like the most nuance in what he does in the offensive zone, but he's quite effective in what he does do well. Whereas Victor Eklund is he's a spark plug. He's a 5'11", 161-pound right shot left winger who, as we mentioned, plays with a bunch of pace and pairs that pace with a lot of skill as well. He's really skilled, and I noticed him so much in my viewings of Linus Eriksson last season, especially in the Hockey Allsvenskan playoffs, where those two were playing on a line together for Jurgen, and I mean, Eriksson was playing his role very well. Like we both liked Linus Eriksson a lot, but Victor Eklund was standing out on every single shift and making things happen, pushing the pace, using his skill to access the inside. He has a really high motor and outworks a lot of professional competition. And in our eyes, that elevates him to being a top 10 caliber pick. Whereas with Frondell, he's obviously injured at the moment as well. So that pushed him down a little bit potentially down our board for not getting like draft year viewings in just yet. But a lot to like. It's just, I don't think there's a level of excitement in his NHL projection and upside of like being a top liner to really like necessitate putting him in a top 5 or top 7 range.
For sure. And that wraps up our first segment. We'll get into our second segment here where we talk about some QMJHL standouts. So we'll talk about some prospects we haven't talked about much on this podcast, but deserve some mention, including Justin Carbonneau, Carlos Händel, and more in just a second. But just before, a quick word from our sponsors at Indeed. We're all driven by the search for better here at Locked On. But when it comes to hiring, the best way to search for a candidate isn't to search at all. Don't search. Match instead with Indeed. If you need to hire, Indeed is the best place to do it. It's your matching and hiring platform of over 350 million global monthly visitors and a matching engine that helps you find quality candidates fast. You can dish the busy work and use Indeed for scheduling, screening, and messaging all in one place so you can connect with candidates faster and more efficiently. And Indeed doesn't just help you hire faster. 93% of employers agree that Indeed develops the highest quality matches compared to other job sites, according to a recent Indeed survey. One of the things I liked about Indeed as someone who got his day job through Indeed, very useful, very practical, no surprises, nothing hidden, exactly what the criteria, the quality, the qualifications that they're looking for from their employers are, so you can make the best decision for your career by knowing exactly what you're getting into. So right now, all listeners of the show can get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/lockedon. Really easy. Just go to Indeed.com/lockedon right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. That's Indeed.com/lockedon. Terms and conditions apply, but if you need to hire, you need Indeed. Alrighty, so let's get into the second segment here where we talk about some QMJHL standouts. And I'll take the lead a bit on this because I've been basically watching QMJHL hockey for the past month religiously. So we'll start off with Justin Carbonneau, who I don't think is talked about enough on this podcast. He's a prospect we haven't really mentioned much. We've obviously talked about Caleb Desnoyers and Emile Guité and Alex Wong and those guys. Even Bill Zonin got some praise on this podcast, but Justin Carbonneau has been fantastic to start off the season. I believe he's at 10 points in 4 games or 5 games so far throughout the season, and he's been playing decently well. I mean, with Carbonneau, what's so interesting is you have the high end speed, the high end pace in this game. Does everything fast. He forechecks hard. He transitions the puck quickly, and he's got the skill as well. So he's got an elite shot. I think it's one of the maybe top 5, top 10 shots in this draft so far through the prospects I've watched. He's got great passing as well, where he's able to connect with teammates quickly. I wouldn't say he connects intelligently, but he connects plays quickly. He moves the puck quickly. He identifies his options quickly. He uses look-offs and deception in order to connect with his teammates. So his playmaking is definitely good. And he's got fantastic hands as well. Again, the decision-making on that side isn't really the best. Doesn't make the best handling decisions, but when he does handle the puck, when he does speak, he's creative, he's inventive, he's skilled. So there's definitely something to work with there. I think the main issues with Carbonneau's game is a lack of processing and intelligence in his game. I think I've harped on him enough in the Scouts group chat over at AP regarding that.
A little bit.
But yeah. He struggles, and like when it comes to processing, when it comes to decision making and intelligence, I don't really see anything that there is to work with here. Yes, there's look-offs and one-touch passes and those types of smart little details, but I don't think that'll be enough to fool NHL defenders at the next level. Because a lot of the times, even though he's looking off his target when he's passing, he's made up his mind 5 strides ago. You know exactly where the puck's going 5 strides ago. So are look-offs going to be enough for an NHL defender to think he's doing something else? I don't think so. But yeah, that's the main issue with his game overall, is just the decision-making. In transition, when he's deking, he'll just either attack opponents straight on, or he'll take on 3 defenders in transition. And it's just like, there's other options, dude. Like, just choose something else. But I think the main thing, regardless of what happens, is you can fall back on that goal-scoring skill, right?
He's definitely a very skilled player, and I mean, he has 12 points, including 4 goals in 6 games so far this season with Blainville-Boisbriand, which is good for like a sole position in 4th in QMJHL scoring, behind some really notable names like Justin Côté, who is a QMJHL superstar at this point, Lars Steiner, and Jonathan Fauchon as well, who's his teammate. So you have a couple players in there for sure that are notable.
That's 16-year-old Lars Steiner, by the way.
Yes,
16-year-old European import Lars Steiner. We'll reserve that for another month, where we kind of delve into the 2026s, because there's a decent amount of them in the queue as well. This isn't going to be an isolated good year in the queue. In 2025, next year's coming up as well. There's Maddox Dagenet, Xavier Villeneuve, and Lars Steiner, of course. But yeah, it's going to be an interesting couple of years for the queue. But there's some more prospects to talk about here. Carlos Händel has been fantastic. Well, not fantastic. I would say he's adapted slowly, gradually, but decently well over the last couple of games. He's a 6'1.5" right shot defenseman. 6'1.5" rather, right shot defenseman. From Germany, he had a great Hlinka Gretzky tournament, which put him on the map. Then he moved to Halifax for his draft year. The adaptation has been slow. There's still some progress to be made on that side, but what really stands out with him is a combination of skating and rush defending, the way that he surfs opponents, pushes them along the boards. It kind of separates guys from pucks in ways that you barely notice that he just stripped the puck away from you as a forward. He does it so smoothly and just with pure subtle stick work that before you know it, he's transitioning the puck the other side when you were the one skating up the ice. It's very, very confusing for forwards, and you can see it in their game. So like his game as well. Nathan Quinn is a prospect that I'm proud to say I discovered out of the queue. He's been very, very good.
You introduced me to him, and I loved my first viewing there too.
Yeah, absolutely. Just very smart, pretty pacey. He's your Owen Beck type, where he's not necessarily the most physical, but he does a lot of things right, reads the game incredibly well, and has a decent amount of playmaking and goal scoring skill. He's a prospect who I think could potentially push for a first round and kind of make his way into a first round by year's end if he continues on this path and adds a bit more pace and snarl to his game. Those are the main things that are missing. So far, he's a second rounder for me, but a high second rounder, somewhere in the 35 to 50 range.
Exactly, and he's an August 29th, 07 birthday too, so it's one of the youngest players in this draft class, and to be that young and play a game that's so polished and refined while being just thrust into a top-line role with Quebec and really facilitating the aforementioned Justin Côté a bunch on that top line and been a big part of the reason why Cote has just like absolutely popped off in terms of production so far this season. Yeah, there's a lot to like with Nathan Quinn, but there's another QMJHLer that you like actually even a tad bit more than Quinn, and that is Owen Conrad. So talk me through his game.
Absolutely, yeah, he's been fantastic. He's a 6'2.5" left shot defenseman. Plays for, I want to say, Charlottetown. I don't have it in front of me. Is it Charlottetown? Yeah. Okay.
It is indeed Charlottetown, and he has a goal and 4 points through 7 games this season.
Yeah, absolutely. He's been fantastic so far. Mainly kind of an intelligent rush defender, a guy who's really going to nail down the defensive side of things. He's physical both during the game and after whistles, gets engaged in post-whistle scrums, isn't scared of those situations. So he's got the physical edge, the snarl that I look for from QMJHL defensemen, on top of some decent smarts. That's usually the thing missing from QMJHL defensemen. It's their reads, it's their processing. It's a bit slow. It's a bit behind the par that you look for first-round potential candidates. But Conrad's a decent processor of the game. He makes good decisions in transition, and has some offensive pop as well. Not the best shot, I would say, but decent passing. Really, really good distributor in the offensive zone. He plays on the second power play for Charlottetown and does a pretty decent job on that side, but he's mainly your physical stay-at-home defenseman that can also chip in offensively. I usually don't like my pure defensive defenseman in the first round unless they're really, really, really good at it. I would say that Conrad is really good at it. He's not really, really, really good at it, but at the same time, he's got some offensive pop that I look for. So I see him more as a two-way defenseman who leans a bit more defense and does both things equally well. So he's got some decent potential. And lastly, Philippe Veilleux, who I think is going to be a second to third rounder. He's 5'10" forward from Val d'Or. He's basically on an island over there. Him and Nathan Brisson are like basically the only two players worth watching on Val d'Or, unfortunately. But yeah, he's been great. Great processing, great playmaking, really intelligent in transition, decent skater. He's got some decent defensive foundations as well, even though I think he's forced to apply them with Val d'Or right now because it's played in every scenario. But Veilleux's really interesting. I think that he's got some decent tools to work with, and he's going to make a team happy in the second or third round. Again, he's undersized, but he does a lot of things right and has a decent amount of pace and skill. So I like his game as well. But that's the second segment done. We'll get into the third segment where Sebastian will take over for the USA's less talked about prospects on this podcast, including Jack Murtagh, Ben Kevan, and a bunch more in just a second. But just before, a quick word from our sponsors at FanDuel.
Hey NFL fans, you can start the season out big with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So when you get a hunch in the middle of a game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the exact same page where you place your bets. And you can take those swings on whatever you want, whether it be American football or European football. The Champions League is now in full force with the first 2 match days now in the rear view and all the big leagues really ramping up. Or maybe you're not a football fan in any capacity and you prefer tennis, golf, or hockey. Of course, the NHL season is starting up now too, and a lot to get excited for, especially with that being the topic of this podcast. You'll get started with a $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. That is FanDuel.com.
All right, moving on to our third and final segment, we'll be talking about the USHL standout prospects that we haven't talked about yet. And we're going to start off with a very interesting prospect who's making a push for the first round, who's in our first round so far at EP. Spoilers. But yeah, he's been doing fairly well. And the main marquee tool, on top of, having some decent skills around it, but the main marquee thing about his game is the release, right?
Yeah, Jack Murtagh is one of my favorites of this NTDP class so far. As you mentioned, he has a wicked release. He plays as a left winger on the NTDP team, and he's an August 22nd birthday. So also one of the younger players in this draft class. And beyond just having a wicked shot, which, and if you're following by like EP ranking grades, is at least a 6th grade, maybe pushing for 6.5 on our grading tool. And he's not the biggest guy in the world at 6 foot, 185 pounds, but he plays with unrelenting violence. He hits everything that moves. He's not the most refined physical player at this point, but he certainly has the willingness to engage physically and definitely he initiates contact whether he has the puck on a stick or not in just about every situation that you find him in. And he's only played 2 games so far with the NTDP this season, but he does have 2 goals to his name that both came in a game against the Waterloo Blackhawks. And overall, if you combine the work rate, the physical engagement, the shooting ability, the intelligence, the scanning habits, there's so much to like in this game, but he remains very much a projection. That said, this is the profile of player that consistently gets selected between 20th and 35th overall on NHL draft day, because he's a really easy bottom six projection and could even have like a complimentary second line upside like in his development ahead. So a lot to like with him. And he's also just been a very consistent player so far for the program, which stands out a lot among this year's bunch, because it's not the strongest group that we've seen in the past couple years. Benjamin Kevan is another very fun player, the only non-NTDP player I'll be talking about in this segment, and he plays with Des Moines, and he got injured for a little while at the beginning of the season, so he missed a couple games there, but he's back in full force, and through 3 games, he's already logged 2 goals and 4 points. He's a really dynamic, fantastic skating forward. He's a right shot. He's been playing on the wing so far this season, but he's intelligent enough that he could be playing at center. We'll see how he ends up being developed, but with his speed, with his dynamism, he can definitely excel while playing along the wing, and also just not having to do too much in the defensive zone. His defensive engagement comes and goes a little bit. When he's engaged, he's quite effective, but he also is a bit more of a cherry picker at times. So the defensive game definitely still has some runway in terms of improvement, but you wouldn't be picking him for his defensive contributions. You're picking him because he's really skilled and creative with the puck on his stick. He's extremely pacey as well, and that combination of skill and pace is one that can absolutely light up the USHL, and I think it will this season. He was the highest scoring player from last year that is returning to the USHL this season. He scored 24 goals and 57 points in 59 games last year, and I think he is more than going to one-up that this season. Anything you want to talk about with those 2 forwards so far, Hadi?
Yeah, I mean, Jack Murtagh is probably my favorite of the 2. I like Kevan, but Jack Murtagh has shown a lot in this game. Snarl, violence, aggression, on top of the physical, on top of the goal scoring tools as well. The ability to kind of change the angle of his release, shoot in motion. Some great shooting tools on his side as well. But yeah, Murtagh is, for me, my favorite of the NTDP so far. Even though I think Moore has more upside, Will Moore.
Yeah.
Murtagh has just been overall better. So he's been interesting to watch. But yeah, talk me through Mace'o Phillips as well. He's this big physical defenseman who's been playing really well for the NTDP so far, right?
Yeah, absolutely. The last 2 players that we'll be covering are both massive and very physical defensemen for the program. And Mace'o Phillips is one that hasn't gotten as much airtime so far this season than Carter Amico, who will be the next one that we'll be covering here. But I've really appreciated Phillips's game. He's a 6'5", 214-pound left shot defenseman who is just not the biggest offensive creator in the world, but is just violent defensively, a really sound rush defender. He's able to use his range and his physicality in tandem with pretty good stick work as well while defending the rush. Something that I really like in his game, that he does go for his stick-first approach the vast majority of the time when he is defending the rush. He doesn't want to take himself out of the play. He goes to smother play into the boards when he's able to, and he's a pretty decent skater as well. The pivots definitely need some more work, but the foundation for this player is really solid in my eyes. And if he ends up being available in the second round on draft day, I think an NHL team is going to be very, very happy to take that swing, because, as you mentioned, he's very big and he's very physical, and also quite intelligent as well with when he goes for his defensive involvements. Last but not least, though, Carter Amico, probably my favorite player in the NTDP in this draft at this point, even though there's probably 4 or 5 guys that are really tight in one big tier, going from like 20th overall to like 35th or 40th overall. Jack Murtagh, Will Moore definitely fall into that range as well. But Carter Amico is really toolsy. He's 6'5" as well, just like Mace'o Phillips, and at 205 pounds as a right shot. A very, very valuable profile, but he's a really solid skater, very fluid in his motions on the ice. There's definitely still some, I think, like explosiveness that he could enter into his game to maybe get a little bit more separating speed, or the speed to catch up to forwards that get around him, perhaps. But very good rush defender. He's a bit more dynamic as a defenseman than Mace'o Phillips is. Mace'o Phillips just goes to kill plays. Amico's a lot more cerebral in how he does that, and he goes to separate the puck from the puck carrier, whether that be with his stick or his physicality. He's able to layer that, but also just go for one of the two when he doesn't need to do more than that. And he's also a really good puck handler. The handling skill is something that is shown in flashes at this point, and while the offensive involvement's been a little bit limited so far this season, he's basically glued to the offensive blue line on the cycle. He's still a player that has been able to really show some bright flashes with the puck on his stick and even go from the defensive zone, carry the puck into the offensive zone to establish a cycle. And a lot of flashes with him, but still a lot of projection as well. So he's not a top 20 player at this point in my eyes, but probably is the toolsiest and most projectable of the bunch with the NTDP in this draft class from this first month of viewings.
Perfect. So that wraps things up for our final segment here and for our episode. Thank you very much for tuning in. If you're watching on YouTube, remember to like and subscribe if you like the episode, and remember to leave us a comment letting us know what you want us to talk about next. If you're listening on your favorite podcasting platform, please give us a rate and review, and make sure to make us your first listen of the day. For your second listen of the day, make sure to check out Locked On Sports Today. They've got all your news and updates about what's going on around sports. Make sure to tune in for our next shows as we continue our prospect coverage for the month of October. This has been Hadi Kalikesh with Sebastian. Hi, and we hope you tune in next time.